All right, you can do the 3, 2, 1 thing.
3, 2, 1.
Hello, everybody.
That's the start right there. That's really good.
Hello, everybody. My name is Maya. Welcome back to this very serious episode of Vibration Translation. Today, we have a person in person with us sat across the table. It's going to be very serious this time. David.
How?
Oh my God, this is David. He's a good friend, a breathwork facilitator with experience in wellness consulting. Is that right?
Yeah, that's great.
That's great. Holistic. He thought holistic was very important to mention.
You're doing great.
He's also a multidimensional traveler, here to report on his awakening and spiritual journey. Let's get into it.
That was great.
Would you like to add anything else about who you are, where you come from, where do you go? Where did you come from? Where did you go?
I feel like that's a really open question. We can go a lot of directions with that.
Oh yes, we will ask many questions about this who are you? All right, so David, who are you?
Who am I? That's a great question. Who am I is constantly molding and evolving based off my experience.
And what is your experience? What do you believe yourself to be? You know, are you a spirit and a human? And if you believe that, how did you come into this understanding?
That's a really good question. I feel like I am a spirit having a human experience and a human having a spiritual experience simultaneously. So for me, I feel like there's a lot of maybe misunderstanding around the word spirituality. Okay. Because, something that I'm really fascinated with is etymology. So what does the word mean?
Right.
And so the word spirit and the word breath actually come from the same Latin root, spire or spirita, which basically just means to breathe. And so when someone says that they're spiritual, I'm like, okay.
So you're breathing. So you breathe.
Right. Yeah, I feel like spirituality is such a broad topic, and a lot of people kind of try to box it or compartmentalize it in a space where they don't realize that that's their own personal experience, and everyone has, their individual spiritual experience. So, yeah.
So for you, spirituality is being and breathing?
Yeah.
That's spirituality.
Spirituality is merely just having the human and spiritual experience. It's just a matter, I guess, of how aware you are of those nuances.
What is a spiritual experience?
I think a spiritual experience could be synonymous to self-awareness. So the more self-aware you are, the more you are aware of yourself and your breath, the more you have the potential to become aware of the spiritual aspects of life, which is just like the subtle aspects, picking up on the little stuff, stopping and petting the cat, or, listening to the bird songs, or, noticing your own breath, whatever it may be.
And being self-aware is not the same as being conscious or hyperly aware.
Absolutely, yeah, because then that ties into the aspect of what is the self. So self-consciousness, I think, comes from the mind, right? When we're self-conscious, we're overthinking. We're thinking about what we are. When we're self-aware, we're feeling what we are. It's a felt sense. It's a being. It's a state of being, yeah. And so I feel like true spirituality is really all just one, for myself, that's my individual experience, is all just one act of surrendering. Surrendering to being as opposed to thinking about being.
You guys heard that one? That was a good one. All right, that was a good answer. There's always something in my throat when I start doing this. It's so interesting. I guess it's saying something. I have some kind of throat blockage. Maybe I feel like I can't fully express myself for some reason. It always comes on when I'm doing a podcast. Like it just immediately.
Too. Yeah. And so what you said about wellness consultant, kind of goes deeper into what I would call holistic health, and that even goes deeper into, like, simply put, like rewilding or rechilding ourselves, tapping back into that childlike innocence or curiosity about life. And what that does is that gives us a lens to notice, even like in the throat, right? Like, what's the sensation in my throat? And why is that popping up? And a lot of times that is how tensions or traumas will manifest, or like, patterns or densities is bodily sensations. So what is the sensation in our body, and how can we explore that with an innocence as opposed to a judgment? Because a lot of times we'll experience something that's negative, like pain in the body or anxiety or stress or whatever it is, and we'll superimpose this thought on it.
The
And be
story.
like, this story of like, oh, this is bad, I shouldn't be experiencing this. When in reality, the paradox of that is just by experiencing it, by feeling it, you get to move through it and move through the story that comes up with it.
Instead of saying, why am I like this?
Yeah.
Why am I being like this? Like the feeling like there's something wrong, right? That question is like, there's something wrong with me being like this.
Yeah.
With me feeling this. I shouldn't be feeling something like this. For some reason, like I've definitely had that story. Like sometimes all of a sudden I have a feeling come over me and it's like, there's something wrong. And I start making up this alarm within my head that there's just something wrong with me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of indigenous culture would call this Wetiko. Wetiko, the mind virus. There's actually a book called Dispelling Wetiko. You should check it out. It's pretty cool.
The mind virus.
The mind virus. And so basically what that concept talks about is we have emotions, and if you slow down enough, you'll recognize that emotions are ultimately energy in motion, emotion, an off-gassing of sensation in the body, or an off-gassing of a response to our environment. But most people immediately react to an emotion and then couple it with a thought. So when you couple an emotion with a thought, it forms a thought form, which they would call Wetiko. And so it's like this either conscious or unconscious agreement with our thoughts, with the thoughts, these waves that the mind viruses ride. And depending on how consciously aware we are of those agreements depends on the engagement that our emotions couple and intertwine with these thoughts. And so Wetiko, the mind virus, would be, simply put as a thought coupled with an emotion to create a thought form, and then we water that plant, we water that seed, and it grows in our head, and it grows in our body, and it manifests as different things.
That's a really cool explanation of this. In another book, Reality Transurfing, they mentioned the pendulums. And I've talked about this multiple times on my channel. Yeah, and it's like it takes you one way, like into a state of worry, and then it pendulums them, like it's talking about momentum. Like you build upon the momentum, you water the thought form more and more. What do you choose to water? What do you choose to focus towards?
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, because energy flows where our focus goes. So if we're focusing on the negative in an experience, we're amplifying it. Whereas if we just felt what it was that wanted to be felt in the moment, that's actually our superpower, is feeling and sensation. Superpowers don't come from the mind, in my opinion, even though it is so powerful, but it doesn't work in isolation from the rest of the body. It all works together. And so when we can feel the sensation and recognize the pendulum swinging and notice that, okay, well, like emotions like worry or fear or shame. Like these things have places, because if we're being chased by a tiger, maybe a little bit of fear, a little bit of anxiety is good to get you out of it.
A little bit,
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. But in nature, animals don't hold on to these things.
Right.
They pick up on the ping of their nervous system, kicking them into sympathetic to move, fight or flight, right? And then the moment that they're out of that danger, boom, they either shake, called pendiculation, or they just wiggle, or they just walk it off. And now they're immediately back in. But since we have this hyper self-consciousness, we hold on to that stuff, and then it gets stored, and then, so there's an awareness there. It's like a psychic awareness of feeling being our superpowers to let go.
It's very interesting, because there's some feelings and some, like there'll be things I'm doing but I don't even realize I'm trying to escape from feeling a certain thing, you know? It's like an automatic, I'm just used to like filling my mind for some kind of content. And I don't even know that I'm missing out on something in the stillness that I don't want to feel.
Yeah.
You know? And then it's like, oh shit, wait, there was something there. And now it's like really uncomfortable because I've spent so much time ignoring it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that's the thing about this day and age is Rudolf Steiner actually talked a lot about this, and he was a brilliant mystic, scientist, free thinker, architect, you name it. Rudolf Steiner was just brilliant. I mean, Rudolf Steiner is the one that developed Waldorf schools for education. Waldorf schools. Okay. So yes, it's an immersive type of school. He also developed multiple different kinds of architecture and art. So if you've ever seen anthroposophical art, he developed that philosophical style of viewing the world, which is called anthroposophy. But he talks about these different archetypes or energies, if you will. And so he talks about the archetypes of the pendulum that we were just speaking on. So the pendulum, through Rudolf Steiner's lens and archetypal perspective, would be you have hypermaterialism, which he equates back to basically like a demonic entity from Islam, I believe, is Ahriman. Okay. Ahriman is basically hypermaterialism. So there's no need for spirituality. It's all material. Everything's physical. And so you worship the physical as opposed to going inside, and feeling. So it's like everything's outside. And so you see a lot of that. I mean, that's very prominent in this day and age is the Ahrimanic influence. The other side of the pendulum swing is the hyper-spirituality. And this is where you get spiritual bypassing, you get spiritual gaslighting, you get the spiritual ego, right, which is like the final boss when it comes to understanding and exploring the ego. But you have hyper-materialism and hyper-spirituality. And both sides of the pendulum are escapism. You are avoiding that as the Taoists would call the Wu Wei.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've just seen a video about that, but I haven't watched all of it.
Yeah, and so Rudolf Steiner would call that Christ. So the Christ is the center, or he calls, and Carl Jung talks about this too, holding the tensions of the opposites. So by being in the center line, you are embodying that Christ, which is the center line, holding the tensions of the opposites of the pendulum swing of the hyperspirituality and the hypermaterialism, and embodying that in an integral way. Which is really, and that comes through felt sense. And so like feeling the sensations in the body and not escaping, not using materialism or our phones or, these dopamine farms, because, you've got multi-trillions of dollars put into this supercomputer, this black mirror that we get in front of us. But it's easy, right? It's easy to get dopamine from that. Mm-hmm. It takes true self-discipline to earn our, neurochemicals, to earn our dopamine, to really sit with ourselves and allow that our chemistry to work itself out, as opposed to just seeking something outside of yourself, which can be done in materialism and it can be done in spiritualism. So like that spiritual bypassing or that hyper spiritualism is still negating the physical, the human experience. And so that's why when we started this conversation talking about, do you think you're a spiritual being or do you think you're a physical being? I'd say it's yes. And yes, I am a spiritual being having a physical experience, and I'm a spiritual being having a physical experience.
And you're a physical being having a spiritual.
I'm a physical being having a spiritual experience. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Because it can't be one without the other too.
Yep.
This stuff gets crazy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it really does. It's interesting to sit with, and that for me, that's why a lot of it comes back to like so if you look at all of life as an addiction, right? We're addicted to life because it's part of the play. What are the most rudimentary, fundamental, simple forms of addiction? You take it past seeking a phone or seeking a substance or, emotionally eating. You even take it past like drinking a liquid. It's like there is just breath and consciousness, breath and self-awareness. And those are like our forced forms of either escapism or addiction. And so when you can build a positive relationship.
What are the forced breath? Are you saying?
Breath is our first addiction, right? Think about it.
Well, we need it.
Exactly.
But
it's just a way of spinning the word addiction, right?
Okay.
Like, what is an addiction? A lot of people look at addiction as something. It's like, you've got the different layers and frameworks of perceiving a relationship with something. So a lot of people, say like in the
you can't live without it type of thing.
Yeah, in the AA meetings. AA
right.
is like
Alcoholics Anonymous.
Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't think is necessarily, for me, a helpful perspective, because they're constantly going back into these meetings and reaffirming these affirmations of I am an alcoholic and I am this and I am that. But anytime you say I am, follow that with the most, two most powerful words. Anything that follows, you're declaring.
Yourself to be.
You are, you are proclaiming. And so I think that I've come to the point where it's not about what you do. It's why and how you do it. Like, what is your intention behind what you do? Like, I could be a philanthropist, right? I could be doing all of this positive, impactful things in the world, but if my intentions are off as to why I'm doing it, doesn't really matter. And the inverse is true too. If I am sitting here and we're, partaking in tea, and my intention is to drop in and connect deeper with you and have this substance as a tool to increase awareness and connection, I think that that's a positive intention.
Yeah.
But if I'm using this tea that has caffeine in it as a way to just jack myself out of oblivion and forget about all this, imbalance that I may have in my life, and then that's not a positive tool.
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot there.
And this,
Same with, the phones, the materialism and the spirituality. How are we using the tools that we have? And what's our intention?
How are we using the tools that we have?
Intentionally or habitually? So, yeah.
Well, I want to know, is per you coming into it, so I feel like at least most people would be like, okay, I'm a physical human person, I'm living this life, but to also have the realization of the other side of the coin of being a spiritual being also in the physical experience. How did you come into this understanding, or did you have an awakening moment, and how did you become aware of your spiritual nature?
That's a really good question. I say that I've had several pretty big aha moments that people would be like, okay, yeah, that was your spiritual awakening or whatever it is. But when I really get down to the bare bones of it, like spiritual awakening, whatever that is, I feel like it's been a progressive thing. Like, it's a wave, it's a spiral staircase with trapdoors, that kind of ebbs and flows. And so while I do think there's several instances where I was really like, oh wow, there's a lot more to this than my stories. I'd say it's like a constant remembering or forgetting. It's like we have to forget in order to remember, and we have to remember in order to forget. So it's like, for me, it's like, and this is why breath and meditation are two really big tools, because they help me bring my awareness back into myself right now. So it's like even just taking a moment to really slow down and notice the breath, notice the depth of the breath and how it falls in and falls out of the body. Notice my sensations and notice the thoughts that arise as my mind wants to keep me from sitting still. Like, that to me is the unlearning and rebuilding, the conscious awakening. But if we're getting into specific,
Well, I just want to say, even the way you just spoke, you clearly were getting more into that aware state as you were speaking, and then you were transferring that to me, because the way you were speaking,
yeah,
it got me to
tap into
I
that.
really am just the now, the moment, like I am, and it just comes back to now I am.
Now I am.
Now
Such
I
an
am.
amazing tattoo. Exactly it. Like, and that's a prime example of like, it's not what we do, but how we do it. Because I can talk about this stuff and it's like, it's being filtered through my ego and through my mind and through my experience. But then when we start to really kind of break apart what is sound, and then we tap into the now moment, really deeper, right? It gets weird.
Yeah, it gets weird.
We become the entheogenic. We become the psychic substance, and
the
so,
DMT you speak about that opens up during holotropic breathwork. You facilitate that.
Yeah. So I'd love to explain a little bit more about that too, so that your listeners and you, we can dig back some deeper layers than we talked about last time. You can kind of understand like so you're a breathwork practitioner or facilitator. What does that even mean?
Right.
So
you tell people how to breathe?
Yeah, okay. Well, that sounds like a sham. What do you mean? I breathe already. I breathe all the time. Yeah, so everyone's breathing, but it's just like to the degree of what's our intention with our breath, and how are we using that as a tool, or are we using our breath, or are we being used by our breath? And neither is right or wrong. It's just all about intention. So I do a specific type of breath work. Well, I do about a dozen different types of breath work, depending on the person and what needs to be done. But the one that I primarily use is holotropic breath, or transformational breath specifically, comes from holotropic breathing, which is basically where you breathe heavy for 30 minutes to an hour, and it really helps you get out of your mind and get into your body. And then like on a physiological level, you have in a brainwaves level, a neurological level, you have these different brainwaves. We've got beta, alpha, theta, delta, gamma. And so as we start to breathe in this way, it actually helps us move through the brainwaves. And when we're in beta, we're very analytical. We're very, self-conscious. It's go, 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 do, 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 which serves a purpose because, we want to be able to go, 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 and do, do, do. And the cerebellum, which is where a lot of that activity is happening, and the neocortex. We want good activity in there, and it's helpful to have tools to learn how to move and navigate through these brainwaves, because this helps us get into what's called flow. And so that happens through what's called transient hyperfrontality.
And where's flow? Which brainwave is flow? Is that alpha?
Flow. So we've got beta, and alpha is a really good flow brainwave, alpha and theta, but really gamma. Gamma is going to be like full flow, where you're wide. It's like the way you could describe, and I think that this was Jamie Wheel talked a lot about this. So like flow could be described as effortlessness, timelessness, spacelessness, and information richness. So when we lose track of time, we feel like all space-time is like turning into time-space, where it's like our reality starts to warp. We start to be able to receive information at a much higher rate. And then just like this effortlessness, it's like the way we learn is so effortless. We're not trying at anything. Yeah, it's like it's all just happening, and we can just pick up and let go of whatever we want to. And so through this breath practice, you get into what's called transient hypofrontality. And transient hypofrontality could be compared to a self-induced psychedelic trance. So transient movement, lower frontality. The frontal lobe and the neocortex are lowering, and these centers, these spaces in the brain that are lowering activity, are associated with tension, with trauma, and with identity. And the reason that that's helpful is because as you start to move through these spaces, and so it's happening from a gas exchange, you're starting to dump gases, carbon dioxide, and you're using oxygen in a different way. So this gas exchange creates this transient hypofrontality that then starts to kind of flush the body and move the energy. And the reason that that's cool and yeah, it is pretty crazy. The reason that that's cool and helpful is because now we've just opened up a window into flow. So when we open up a window into flow, now that gives us an opportunity, and this is why it's kind of like, well, I don't need to go down that rabbit hole right now, but it gives us an opportunity to kind of reorganize, recapitulate our self. So we can let go of the stuff that's not serving us.
What's important.
Tensions, the traumas, what is it you want to let go of? And that's a big part of the practice too, is not what you do, but why and how you do it. So me as a coach or a guide, my main role is just giving the person cues to help them drop and get deeper into the practice, as well as giving them a container and a framework of how to get the most out of the practice, which is setting intention. So what are you trying to let go of? And what are you calling in? Because if we don't let go of things, it creates, it's like a vacuum. If your vacuum is full of dust, it's going to be hard to clean up new stuff. But if you empty the vacuum, you have space to then suck up new stuff or set new intention. So you let go. So what are we letting go of to create space for what are we calling in? And then when you do that with the breath, now you're in flow state. So you have this effortlessness, this timelessness, this information richness, this spacelessness to then superimpose in that intention, that prayer, or whatever it may be.
Right. That's beautiful. And do you have your own breathwork practice? Like, is it something you do on a daily or weekly basis, or does it change?
Yeah. So I do breathwork every day. Every single day. There's not a day that goes by that I don't do breathwork.
And how long do you do like a whole hour session a day, or more like a 20?
It looks different. So like when I was initiating myself into this practice, I was doing transformational breathwork, which is over an hour, 3 times a week, which is a lot.
Right.
It's a lot to do this type of practice. But even before that, so I've been practicing breathwork for probably 6-7 years now, and that's evolved and changed actually. My sister, Candace, was one of the first people who showed me breathwork, besides doing it in just like yoga classes and stuff like that. But it molds, involves, and changes. So my bare minimum breath practice is like 3 cycles of at least 30 breaths of conscious breathing. Something, and that looks different every day. Sometimes that's a wake me up breath. It might be, and then so Wim Hof is a style of breath that's it's in the holotropic world, in the Wetiko world. Sometimes it's a deeply regenerating or nervous system resetting breath, like calming, taking 3 seconds in, 6 seconds out, or 4 seconds in, 7-second hold, 8 seconds out. Something to help rejuvenate and nourish the nervous system in like a parasympathetic way. Other days, it's like just a full-on, holotropic transformational breath where I'm going on a journey.
And now the holotropic is that's the like when you oxygenate yourself a lot.
Hyperoxygenation, yeah.
Right.
And so basically, the practice is really simple. It's a 3-part breath, and it is better to do this with a practitioner so they can monitor your nervous system and all this stuff. And you can do it on your own. There's videos literally online where you can find holotropic breathing on YouTube. But based off my experience, it's way easier to go way deeper and feel safer having a practitioner. But it's basically you're breathing all through the mouth. And so there's different camps in breath work as well, breath work and pranayama. Some people say you should never breathe through the mouth, and you should never heighten your nervous system. And you should only breathe through the nose, low, slow, and deep.
It's more of like a Eastern, I don't know, like yogi.
Not necessarily, because yogis breathe fast. A lot of times they do breathe through the nose primarily. Yeah. So you've got breath of fire, you've got Bhastrika breath. Mm-hmm. They are fast breathing styles, but they're still primarily through the nose. But I'm under the school of thought where basically it's like if our body can breathe in a certain way, we're supposed to be able to breathe that way. And we can breathe like that, but it's all about the intention. So like on a day-to-day where mostly, you probably would want to be breathing low, slow, and deep down into your lower diaphragm, into your pelvis through your nose. That's going to be probably better breathing mechanics for a day-to-day. Holotropic breathing is primarily, for inducing a psychedelic experience.
Right. So when you go into these, and I've only done it for, like the way I interviewed Kelsey on here, and she does a 20-minute, like similar kind of like oxygenating breath, and then a meditation after that for, another 10, 20 minutes. But to do it for that long, like an hour, up to an hour, I've never tried doing that myself. And so even for me, when I do 20 minutes, I get into this just beautiful state. Everything just disappears, I'm just like, all the images are flowing through. Why? So this happens because does DMT get released with this kind of specific?
Yeah.
Or?
So neurochemically, based off my understanding, the hypothalamus, the thalamus, the thalamic gate and the hypothalamus, and we basically have the pineal and pituitary gland. Right. So this is like the pharmacopoeia of our brain and our body. And so that's where hormones, neuropeptides, these chemicals are synthesized in the pineal gland. And then it moves basically through this cycle, through the body, up and down, through different organs, the HPA axis, and down into our reproductive organs, and, through the cerebral spinal fluid and all this stuff, and then back up into the pituitary gland. And your body's constantly doing this. And so the function of your pineal gland actually determines the function of a lot of the rest of your body. That's why it's so revered in so many different cultures. They have the pine cone. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is you have these different chemicals that are produced throughout the day, these different hormones or peptides, that then become synthesized into other things. So you got, for example, serotonin. Serotonin converts to, I believe, it's been a while since I studied this stuff, but I believe it's serotonin to tryptophan, 5-hydroxytryptophan, 5-hydroxytryptophan to melatonin. And then when melatonin gets to a high enough milligrammage, it might even be a microgram. I think it's 25 milligrams. It's pretty high. Something along those lines, it produces DMT, dimethyltryptamine. And we can produce this naturally. It's produced when we're born, when we sleep, and when we dream, and then when we die. But as well as when we have an entheogenic experience. And so what happens is when we breathe in this way, we are stimulating these crystals, these rhombohedron crystals within our body. Through, I guess, what could be called piezoelectricity. So we have...
What kind of electricity?
Piezo.
Piezo, what's that?
Piezoelectricity is essentially this rainbow light spectrum electrical magnetic conductivity that we have in our own body. And piezoelectricity can be stimulated in multiple different ways. And this is what, ancient Qigong practitioners and a lot of people have known about, is stimulating this electrical current in the body to then induce a satori, or self-awareness experience.
A satori? What?
Satori.
Satori?
Yeah, so you have nirvana and samadhi. Samadhi is the sleeping. Nirvana is the waking, the bliss. Samadhi, same as like the Christ, the middle. Samadhi.
It's walking the sleep or something like this.
Yeah, sleep awake. But piezoelectricity. So essentially, when we stimulate these crystals that are inside our brain and our bones and our tissue and our fascia, we're stimulating the movement of these chemicals. And so breath, in my opinion, is one of the best ways to stimulate that. And when you do, you're inducing a self-navigated psychedelic experience.
Now, this is again, because I haven't done it up to an hour, but I'm assuming it will be more intense after an hour of doing this, but it's still not like in your experience, it's different than ingesting a psychedelic.
It's very different.
Very
Yeah.
different.
It's different because of the intention and the pathway. And so, you wouldn't be breathing like this straight for an hour. There is breath holds and releases within that.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah,
I
so
was
it's not,
like,
yeah, you don't just like straight breathe for an hour. So it's very similar. It's about 30 minutes till the first breath hold. 35 minutes, give or take, depending on the person, the practice. It's very intuitive. I do it different based off what people's nervous systems can handle, really. But yeah. So I think the biggest difference, and we can kind of get more into, psychedelics as well too, if you'd like, and I can talk about my own experiences.
yes, I have questions.
Okay. Yeah, because I've got some probably really interesting answers and stories for you. But the biggest difference that I've noticed between a breath practice or holotropic breathing and psychedelics is the pathway and the duration. So it's like, and the integration. So I actually think that breath work integration is easier and vice versa. So the more you do breath work, the easier it is to actually integrate a plant medicine because you understand the mechanisms. And so every plant medicine that I've ever done.
And what kind of have you done? You've done mushrooms, psilocybin, DMT?
I've explored with LSD, psilocybin, DMT, smoking DMT, pharmawaska, the liquid extractions of ayahuasca, combo, which isn't technically a psychedelic, but sananga, as well as, I believe that's it. I think that's it. And for me, I think that's it. The biggest difference, I think, is the capacity to integrate. And so, being on those plant medicines, one of the biggest reoccurring lessons that I ever learned was get back into you, right?
Get back into you?
Yeah, and how do you do that? Oh, through the breath. Where's the love? The love is within the breath. Where's the love? So anytime I was in a psychedelic experience, I'm asking myself, where's the love? Or where's the integration? Or how can I anchor this experience in? It was always through the breath. And so through that exploration, and through meditation, I kind of found a lot of my breath practices on my own, not even through learning from someone else, just learning it through the wisdom of my body. But the beautiful thing about the breath practice is you're the captain of your own ship. And so that kind of led me down the breathwork the breathwork direction. And so I think the biggest difference for me is a lot of the experiences, the downloads, the wisdom, the visions, whatever you want to call it, that you get through breathwork are easier to integrate.
They're not as intense too, I assume. Unless you had like something that's comparable to a psilocybin or DMT. Because I know they vary, right?
It varies, and that is the thing about the breath practices. It's always so unique.
And so is the psychedelic, right?
Yeah,
sometimes
really
it's super gentle, and sometimes it's like...
Yeah. Yeah, so breath has the capacity to be like that too. And since you're kind of your own guide, your breath is the tool and you are the healer, you can slow your breath down, you can speed it up, you can breathe deeper, you can breathe shallower, and that will kind of determine the depth at which you go into the journey. And that gives a lot of control. Not full control, right? Because you still have to let go of the stories and let go of the stories of your mind and the control over, not wanting to breathe deeply. But as to the degree that you breathe is to the degree that you drop in. And so that's different because if you take a plant medicine, it's like mushrooms, okay, you just signed up for 4 hours, You signed up for 6 hours. You take LSD, all right, well, I'll see you in 12 hours, right?
Yeah, I can feel it.
And same with, the other entheogenic substances.
Do you experience timelessness during the breath work as well?
You do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I say, you're breathing for an hour. You're really laying there for an hour and a half. You get done with the practice, you're like, what? I felt like I was breathing for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Or I felt like I was breathing for 3 days. It's just different. Everyone experiences it so uniquely. So yeah.
So I wanna see. Did you have a major like psychedelic breakthrough that like solidified your belief in? I assume you believe in other dimensions behind the physical.
Oh yeah, I've seen way too much.
So like, what was were you atheist, Christian before, like, or what's your background?
Yeah, very good question. So I'd say that my beliefs are constantly molding and evolving, just like my experience. So, you know, I don't make a vow to be consistent, only honest with where I'm at, because that's always changing and it's always subject to change based off my experience. And I think that that's the true mystical path, right? The mystics and the shamans were the first psychoanalysts and the first scientists.
Into the unknown of the mind.
Yeah, exploring it, but exploring it authentically, exploring it honestly, and trying to really, be honest with what they've experienced, and same with myself. I'll just put it in my own shoes. Like, I'm just trying to be as honest and authentic as I can with what I have experienced, and that's really the ultimate locus of testimony, because I could talk about all this stuff, but if I haven't experienced it, it doesn't really, and if I'm not living it, it doesn't really do a whole lot of good. But spiritually, I started out in religion. Yeah, so my dad is and was a pastor, worship leader, and so I grew up in the church, the Christian church, going like 3 times a week, like really in the church.
Yeah. Your whole family was like that?
Yeah. And so that was really my first exposure to anything spiritual in general. That was like my only reference point.
So you believed in God, I assume? Or did you kind of...
I was always questioning. I was always a skeptic. And at first I thought I was, like a rebel. It was like bad. I'm not supposed to question. But now I realize that's my actual soul. That's my actual intuition. Where there's questions, we want to leave room for curiosity, because that's how we get a better relationship with the divine, with all that is by asking authentic questions. But as a kid, I thought that wasn't supposed to happen. Like I was being, disobedient.
You're just supposed to absorb what this is and
you just
follow.
Listen, you take it at face value, and that's what it is, and don't question and all that. But yeah, so my first exposure to spirituality was through Christianity. And, it was a non-denominational church. I don't know if you know what that is, but a little more out there on the fringe side of Christianity. So, people speaking in tongues, people being raptured by the Holy Spirit, so they're falling over.
Extreme, like what, acts of God?
Active, yeah, so the Holy Spirit. So they talk about the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit would, take over these people, and they would fall into, and honestly, I never really had one of those. I just fell over because everyone else was. I was like, I want to take a nap. I could take a nap right now.
Wait, so they were doing like a thing just for you or for everybody?
For everybody.
And then they all just fell over?
Yeah, it's like you support the person and they fall over. They're like,
like,
taken by... Yeah, you get taken by the Holy Spirit. So you like fall over and you're supposed to, all this stuff.
It's interesting. It's kind of like a physical intention of surrender.
Yeah, which now I have. I have actually experienced the rapture of the Holy Spirit. That's a different experience.
But not like going to the church.
The Great Spirit. I would call it the Spirit. Some people would differentiate Holy Spirit and Spirit. I don't. And what does that mean? That's a good question. What is the Holy Spirit to me? Spirit, spire, right? Spirita, to breathe.
What does it mean to get taken by the Holy Spirit, right? Did you have like an experience of...
Yeah, so I try to, die at least once a day. That's a little morbid, but like I like to really set a container for myself to surrender to what I call the surrender experiment, which is something that...
The surrender experiment.
Experiment, yeah. Okay. How much can I surrender to the moment?
This is something you do every day. The surrender experiment I am entering.
Yeah. Which Michael Singer, he literally wrote a book on it. the surrender experiment.
Okay.
But it's like, we all have our own individual flavor. And so my surrender experiment is I do use breath work and meditation and movement to allow myself to soften into body awareness. But the surrender experiment could be put as simply as trusting. Trusting that source has my back. That whatever that all-pervasive, that omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, omnipotent, omnipotent energy that we could call spirit, whatever that is, has my back.
And I feel like it's hard for a lot of people to have that trust because they look at the world and they're like, what do you mean God loves us? Why is this happening?
This looks like complete chaos and anarchy and disorder. Why would you ever trust this? Yes. And so, if I was living based off my past experiences, I could say the same thing. I've had every reason to not trust. And that's why we trust, is leaning past what our past is, leaning past the stories of the mind, because ultimately they're just stories of the mind. I think they even did a study recently and scientifically proved that up to 70% of what people remember is incorrect because it's based off stories. And so when we can move past our stories and experiences of what we've seen in the past and move into what I would call that surrender, we can really experience what I call divine appointments, like we're having right now. The divine timing of now.
Oh, I'm going to tell them. So I was looking at a podcast website and then I scrolled down and it just said David and Maya, right? And then David texted me the next day, hey, do you want to come do like a little tea ceremony? And then I told him about my podcast and he's like, do you need a podcast like guest? And I'm like, I think you're going to need to be on my podcast because it's just so funny.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
And that's like a prime example of divine timing or divine appointments. It's like, that's how it works. And what I've realized is the more that we can trust in this. So it's like source, kind of the universe, however that shows up for you, will kind of plant breadcrumbs. And I want to say tests, but tests sounds kind of schooly and
tasks or
tests. And I guess this is the school of life. We do come here to learn, but it's also playground. So it's like it's a game. Yeah. To me, it's more of a game than it is an assignment. But it is also tests. So Source will kind of test us. It'll plant these breadcrumbs and to see if we trust. And so it's like, oh, we'll plant this little thing, and then we'll also plant a sabotage. So we'll plant this, and we'll sabotage. And we'll see which breadcrumb you go for.
Because you have free will.
You have free will. Yeah. So through free will, you have to have choice, or at least the illusion of that. And so as we lean into, okay, well, I know it doesn't quite make sense to my brain, and I'm still going to trust that things are working out for me, and I'm going to lean into this.
So logically, these kinds of things look random.
They're presumably random.
And somebody that's very, I would say also identifies as a very logical and scientific, but not that you're you've just described so much science, right? But somebody I feel like that identifies with the part, because there's these extremes, right? Of being a very scientific and being a very spiritual, right?
It does.
You know what I mean?
It takes an integration to tie them together.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of what I do. So in human design, I'm a projector 1-3, which is the mental martyr, the investigative martyr. So I got to learn, and then I don't really learn that much, and I'm kinesthetic, and I just throw myself out, and I'm the martyr. So I learn by failure. Failure is an acronym of first attempt in learning. So when I fail early, fail often, I learn, and then I can share that with people. I can distill the information down into something that makes sense.
That's so interesting. I really got to look into human design because there's some real big validity behind that.
I think so. Yeah. And it ties also into, it doesn't always have to make logical sense, because the human design is based off several different systems, but one of them being primarily the I Ching. And so someone who's only logical mind based, and they look at the stars as simply just constellations in the sky.
Gas
It's like,
bubbles.
yeah, they're like, there would be absolutely no reason for me to study the I Ching or the human design, because that's a bunch of wish-wash. But when you apply it, and this is, knowledge applied as wisdom, when you apply it to your life and it actually presumably seems to have validity, it might be a useful tool.
It's interesting. It's interesting, this whole like intuition thing, and then the logical mind, and then how, because I think I just had this conversation yesterday with a friend, and he was talking about how intuition is just like maybe another aspect of the brain that we're just not tapping into. But for me, how I understand intuition is that we're surrendering and we're opening up to spirit, to who we are, to speak to us, so we can trust. But it's hard to even bring this into words for me. Like what is intuition to you?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's good context too, because it gives me something to work with. But no, I kind of fall along the lines of, a similar path as you. I don't think that intuition is another aspect of the mind. And to go deeper than that, I don't think that the mind even inherently exists, right? We're minding our mind. We're thinking about thoughts. That's all an illusion.
We own the mind.
Yeah.
It kind of, I don't know. It's strange.
It is strange, yeah. But I think that I agree with you. Like, intuition to me, so the deeper I lean into this surrender experiment, the intuition, which could also be called the Holy Spirit in Christian sects, or called spirit, intuition, even unconscious, subconscious, superconscious. They're similar things, not exactly, but to me, they're all synonymous. I believe that it's like, it speaks through felt sense. So it's actually not the mind at all. It's actually the body. So the unconscious mind is the sensation stored in the body that people don't talk about. And the subconscious is all the programs that we've developed, but all the programs that we will develop. So it's like this in and out.
And the subconscious can work with you actually towards who you want to become, rather than stopping you.
Yeah, I think even more so, the subconscious should be called the conscious. And the conscious mind should be called the unconscious, because it's like such a small portion of who we actually are. It's so interesting. But yeah, I think that the intuition speaks to us through sensation, through our sensations, through sound, through smell, through breath.
How we feel, Abraham Hicks, right?
Yes, the felt sensation. So even deeper than feeling, because feeling can be kind of miscued as an emotion. Emotion and feeling kind of different.
It's so funny you're bringing this up, because in my other interview of Liminal Mind, we were just having a conversation off screen, but he was literally asking me to define the difference between emotion and feeling. I just thought it was funny.
Oh, okay, that's cool. Yeah, I think they are different, because emotion is actually a reaction or response, depending on the awareness, to a feeling. But a lot of people put them together, like, I feel this, but they're really actually expressing an emotion.
Wait, what? wait.
Yeah, so I'll break that down a little bit. So for me, it's all a matter of how much we can slow down.
Oh, there you are doing the whole slow down. You guys felt that?
Yeah.
He went slow down. And all of a sudden I'm more aware of myself.
It's inflection, because our intention and the way that we speak and the way that we interact with our sensations, I can speed it up, I can talk about it, it's fun, wow, it's it's fluffy, it's light, it's mind, it's mental masturbation. But as I slow down into the sensation of sound, right? And so this is when we're really spelling, we are speaking intentions out. But it's all much more not about what we say, right? It's not about what we do or say. It's about how and why we say it. Because we can create this psychic substance, this awareness of sensation. And so basically, when we slow down enough to feel the sensations below the filter of the mind, so we have the mind filtering sensations and feeling. And then we have the story that the mind is telling about the sensations that we're having. And most people think that is sensation. But that's really just a neurological impulse. That is a nerve cluster telling a story about sensation. But when you drop into the body and you slow down enough, you recognize...
The body speaks.
Yes, the body speaks. And that is the intuition. And this is where things like muscle testing, which is just applied kinesiology, come through. And the reason why they're so accurate is because it's expressing, yes, through electromagnetism, through the body, right? The aura, the pulse of the body, the field. But it's coming from something deeper.
This is very interesting. So you're saying that spirit accesses the body more easily, maybe because it's more tuned into nature, kind of? Our nature, our body, rather than our mental story?
Perfect. I love that you brought up that word, because this brings it full circle for what I started talking about. So I love etymology. What does a word mean? And like we talked about last time we were hanging out, 3 of my favorite words, and most of these are triggering to people just based off of lack of understanding, is breath, nature, and religion. The reason I love these words is when you put them together, I feel like that's true spirituality. So you have breath, which is synonymous with spirit, or Latin root spire, spirita. Then you have nature, which Latin root is natura, which means to birth or to co-create. To birth or to co-create. And then you have religion, which comes from the Latin root religio, which means deep reverence. So deep reverence or appreciation for. So when we are in a state of gratitude, that's when we're in true religion. And so you put these together, you have birthing or co-creation in conscious breathing through deep appreciation. So when we are in appreciation, when we are in deep reverence for our natural state, which is to co-create or to recognize what's already here, really more so. Co-creating is just, it's not really about creating anything new because it's already been created, right? It's about seeing what's already here and appreciating that, and then creating through our own self-expression of already seeing what is. And then through conscious breathing or spirituality. So when we consciously breathe, this gives us a deeper capacity to notice and appreciate what's already here so that we can create through our own authentic individual self-expression.
I'm going to have to listen to that again. I'm going to have to listen to that again. Yeah, that was a lot, so I'm going to have to definitely listen to that again.
Yeah, maybe go back and listen to that a time or two.
Rewind right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to have him... All right, now I'm back in the future again. Got the magical power, okay? Just believe me.
Yeah.
You must believe me.
Trust and believe. Don't question. But yeah, so there's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack. But winding all the way back to where you started the question at with the conversation about religion and spirituality, like how did I first experience spirituality? I think religion is very important because it provides a structure for people to interact and engage with spirituality.
And what are some like points maybe you think that Christianity taught you that you still kept with yourself? Is there anything you kept from the values of Christianity?
A direct relationship with the living, tangible presence of spirit. That's probably wasn't taught through religion, but the concepts were taught, which was enough for me to want to explore it. But direct experience to me is so much different than words on a paper.
Yes.
But I think that the principle, so the principle of Christianity as a religion is good, right? It talks about do unto your neighbor as you would do unto yourself, right? And a lot of the philosophies and the teachings of Jesus or Yeshua were good. They were positive, right?
Can I ask why is he called Yeshua?
That's his name, Joshua. Yeshua.
Okay.
Jesus and Christ was never his name. Jesus and Christ are both titles. Christ, and this gets back into what we were talking about earlier, is a title, the anointed oil, to become one with the anointed oil.
Why is it an oil?
Because it's an oil. So if you've ever seen a baptism or heard about it, they use oil to baptize, olive oil. But that's just symbolic. You have actual anointing oil. And that's within you. That is that same cycle, that cyclical nature of the moving of the pharmacopoeia, the chemicals within your body, and cerebrospinal fluid.
Oh, the DMT and the...
There you go.
Okay.
So
Anointed.
it's, yes, anointed, yeah, to see. Religion does provide a really good structure, basis for a spiritual experience, and some people need that for their entire lives. But I think that people get caught up in intellectualizing those concepts and just becoming talking heads, right? They're just talking about, and I can even be subject to being a talking head. I mean, right now, technically, I'm a talking head, right? Because sometimes you got to come out of the awareness into sharing in order to get back in.
I mean, imagine being in this deep DMT experience. I know you've had like at least probably a couple.
Yeah.
And imagine being there and just telling everybody exactly what's happening in this structured manner.
Impossible. Yeah.
You know.
Impossible. Yeah. So it's like you got to have the direct experience, but sometimes we can plant seeds, breadcrumbs, and we can help each other. It's like we can move forward, and then we lend a hand back. We lend our hand back to help others, or to just be pathfinders, way showers, whatever that is.
It's transmitting a state. Well, not necessarily transmitting, but why I'm called like vibration translation is because it's translating the state of awareness for the people that are ready to kind of hear about either a different perspective, or not that we're better, it's so interesting because it's like not that somebody's better than another just because you're further along on the spiritual understanding, because it's like,
because that's all the ego.
The more you know, the less you know. And then it's like, but then it's like, it's just so interesting in this kind of like, I guess, sector of, people being spiritual teachers or healers or even facilitators. Like, I know some people probably that come to your classes are going to think of you as higher up spiritually in some sense. Or like yoga teachers, people think of, oh, the yoga teacher knows.
Yeah.
Well,
the way that I look at that is sometimes we need to put someone else. Sometimes people put others on a pedestal because that's what they've been shown. And it can be helpful until it's not. It can be helpful because then it gives them something to work towards. But really, it's all an illusion. It's like a Buddhist koan. A koan is a riddle that is a paradox. It's paradoxical in nature and it makes no sense. And so from the mind, you're like, why am I reading this nonsense? This is bullshit, right? This text doesn't make any logical sense, and why would someone ever write this? But what happens is the more you read into it, it trips you into yourself. And so it's the same with gurus, right? Gurus, there's no point in having a guru or a healer or a spiritual teacher, but to trip you into yourself. And so the best...
Trip you into yourself. It's like a little trick.
Yeah, it's a trick. It's a trick, but it's an honest trick because the intention is right. It's not a deceptive trick because these people, for the most part, and people do use this in deceptive ways, right? We've got so many stories of gurus, abusing the power.
And a lot of them do have like, at the core, like spiritual truths or spiritual wisdom, right?
Exactly, because they're using partial truths to then be deceptive to people. So they're using their power and their innate awareness to manipulate as opposed to manifest, which is reflecting the divinity. So every great healer doesn't heal others, right? They teach others how to heal themselves. Every great leader doesn't create followers. They create leaders. And so that's what I mean by like reaching back, giving a hand, and helping to pull forward.
Like here,
It's not like, oh, here's my hand, now you can hold on to me.
You're here with me at the
forever.
same.
Yeah, it's like you get here and you just let go because the levels are all illusions of the mind.
Yeah.
So it's not like I am like more spiritually evolved than someone else because I've done these practices in a certain way and it's led me to whatever.
It's like the checklist of how to be spiritually
evolved.
How
to be spiritually evolved. Yes, let me check this
Breath
off. I've
work,
checked all
yoga,
the boxes. Yeah.
Ayahuasca, whatever,
Yeah, none of that really matters. It only matters to the degree that it helps you show up in your life. And so some really good, actually a helpful, a truly helpful checkbox is like, is my spiritual experience helping me to have more empathy and compassion for other people? Is it helping me to find the love in myself and the connection to others? Is it bringing joy and peace? And is it bringing presence? because those things are actually important. And
It's a great list.
And to that degree, you know, there could be these tools can be helpful, right? Because to the degree that we can do these things is probably to the degree that our practice is actually effective. But I think so many people get caught up in the bypassing spiritually or physical, you know, materially, that they forget the fundamentals. And this is even written in the Bible. And there's a song about it. Righteousness, which would just be to do what is true, to do what is right. Peace and joy in the Holy Ghost. That's the kingdom of God.
Well, I like what you talked about. You know, you talked about direct experience, the breadcrumbs of the omnipotence.
Yes.
And
yes.
I like how you talked about, we were talking about Christianity, and then you spoke about the direct experience, which I want to link back to the idea of experientiality, because our minds can only understand so much. Like, I feel like I kind of, along my own spiritual journey, I was reading a lot. Like, when I was in high school, I was reading a lot of these kinds of books, and really just being like, I want to experience that. I want to experience that. What the heck? Like, why are people like experiencing this kind of stuff and I'm not experiencing? And so then I went Then I went into just
divine timing.
I kind of swing the pendulum into experientiality and being like, I just want to experience and just surrender to the experience.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's also that swinging of like, okay, now, but like bring it back to the center too. But I think sometimes swinging to an extreme is of importance to somebody's own journey.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really good nuggets in that. And so ultimately, yeah, like I feel like if you can't come out of balance, you're weak, right? Like if I can't go over here and get back here, I obviously have some issues with like my TVA, my tonic and phasic muscles to move through the body and the body to move through space. So it's like coming out of balance and wanting to learn intellectually and understand isn't a bad thing. It's just, it's never going to supersede an innerstand. To innerstand or innerstanding is always going to supersede. Direct experience is always going to supersede intellectualizing. So we can learn the words and we can talk the lingos and we can correlate to different cultures and different,
and there's value in that.
And there's value. There is real value in that, like I was saying, because there's your structure,
yeah.
Right? And as humans, we need that structure a lot of times. But it's never going to give you, I don't want to say never, 99% of the time, 99.9% of the time, it's not going to give you the same initiation as a direct experience. And Carl Jung talks about this. Basically, he talks about the individuation process, that the person's individual spiritual experience is the most important spiritual experience because it's yours and you're having it. And basically, the way you enter into individuation is by integrating all the parts of yourself. So that integration happens with archetypes. And you can have these universal archetypes.
The fool, then all the way to the emperor or something
the king,
like
the lover, the warrior, the magicians are archetypes. And then you have like survival archetypes. You have the child, the mother, the father, the prostitute, the saboteur. Hundreds of archetypes. And you have archetypes in different cultures, right?
And it's like each one has its own lesson, the individual to learn.
Yeah. And then you have individual archetypes, right? Like Maya.
I'm an archetype.
You're an archetype within yourself.
That's so interesting.
And now, Maya, you're an archetype within my field because we're interacting and we're connecting.
Right.
And
David, the archetype of David. I would, if I didn't know you, I wouldn't have you as a reference for who you are.
Exactly. But who I am to you, because who I am to you isn't the same of who I am to
your
me.
Mom, or to you.
Or to my mom.
Yeah.
And so like these different archetypes, even within the single archetype of Maya, show up different to me as you would to your mom. And based off correlation and reference point. So you have a longer lasting experience with your mom. So she's going to be referencing more and different parts of Maya than I do. But maybe not. because it's like, what is the capacity to drop in with the parts of Maya and the individual archetype of Maya?
That's crazy.
Isn't that kind of crazy? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so by integrating basically what Carl Jung would call our shadow aspects, the shadow parts of ourselves that we don't want anyone to know about, that we don't even want to know about sometimes, that's how we really orient ourselves.
It can get really ugly, like as we look at the world, like there's people have all types of like impulses. Just as like for one out there, like pedophilia. Like if somebody feels that way towards kids, how are, like they're gonna have to come to terms with that aspect of themselves.
Yes. And so, I mean, that's a pretty heavy one. We just jumped right in. But,
yeah, I like to jump in.
Yeah, but that's a good example, though, because say pedophilia, for example. I think that pedophilia, it's like you do need to come to terms with the potential aspects within yourself that are correlated to those people, because we see the world as, we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. And so I think that the people that actually feel the urge to express that, like actually,
like uncontrollably kind of.
Yeah, like impulsively or reactively, is lack of integration. So like if you think about it, hurt people. So if someone is a pedophile, for example, they probably have a deep wound to their inner child. And so they are hurt.
So they want to abuse the
They
child.
don't have the tools. They haven't been given the tools and understanding of how to connect with their inner child in a way that is positive and helpful.
And they might even feel like that's being loving to do that.
Well, in a twisted way.
Maybe
they
obviously
do.
not actually.
It is,
but,
yeah. So it is. I mean, that's why it's called perverted. They're a pervert. They've distorted the perception of what love is because it was distorted for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so hurt people. And if they don't have the tools to actually navigate and move forward to heal those aspects within themselves, they're going to hurt more people. And unfortunately, since one of the deepest wounds, survival archetypes, is their child, now they're hurting children. And so it's really sick. It's a deep sickness. And it sounds weird, but having compassion for those people and being able to see it like this is tough. It's one of the hardest things. You know, it's much easier to just have hate.
But the thing
anger
is,
and
like,
aggression to
if
them.
you have hate, anger, and aggression towards that, that's another reflection of how you feel about that part of yourself.
There you go.
And I know it's like, oh, I'm not a pedophile. Why would I have that part of myself? But like, we're all, to me, it's like,
we're part of this collective.
We're one organism of this earth. Like,
so technically, depending on what you consider yourself, right? And this is where it gets initiative. It gets mystical at this point. But what is yourself? Is yourself what you identify as, the ego? Or is that your part of self? Because yourself doesn't really stop at what your mind identifies
what's the mind self versus what's the big S
exactly,
self?
because the large S self is much greater than that. And so technically, those nasty parts are part of self. And so our energy flows where our focus goes. So it takes just as much, if not more energy to focus that energy towards hate and aggression towards someone like that than it does to focus it towards resolution and compassion.
I know Kiki, your sister has like, I didn't look into this, but she has something about Candace Sauve. Sauve.
Yeah.
Candace Sauve. She has, what does she do? She's like a empowering woman, but she does something about anger, like healthy way of processing anger.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big emotional archetype, because there's another archetype, emotional archetypes, that she works with women. How do you embody righteous anger, right? Because like I was saying before, there's no such thing as a good or bad emotion. It's about the intention and how it's being expressed. So it's like anger has its rightful place, right? Like sometimes we have to implement righteous anger. Which what is the role of anger? Well, it helps us learn how to set boundaries. Sometimes we have to get really angry and almost borderline hostile to be like, no, this is actually just a reflection of me having sloppy thinking and not being able to set a safe boundary in my life towards other people in my interpersonal relationships.
And that's hard for some topics, because then it's like, is this victim blaming, you know?
Yeah.
I personally don't think it is, but it can come off this way, you know what I mean?
Yeah, because it's a tightrope. Yeah. It's a thin line between the victim and between the boundary. because we can set righteous boundaries, and we can be sovereign and autonomous in our energy, and respect ourselves without being a victim. But it is such a tightrope, and that kind of ties into the same tightrope of anger, aggression, and compassion for someone who does some unspeakable things, just terrible things. But I do think that it actually takes a lot more courage to lean into compassion for someone who is nasty than it does to lean into compassion for someone who is lovely, based off our perception.
It's like the lovable child versus
Yeah.
the unlovable child. Like, you know, both of these kids, some kids can be very questionable.
Yeah.
But, like,
they can be rambunctious. They can be, and so, okay, let's pivot the conversation into the children, right? You've got the lovable child, the perfect child. They're quiet and they're behaved and they're, and then you've got the freaking, you've got the feral child who's freaking wild, bouncing off the walls, looking like a monkey swinging from the chandelier. So you can, it's easy to love the easily lovable child, but then you go a layer deeper and you ask, why is that kid so well behaved? Why are they so quiet? Why are they so perfect? Because in our world, we would consider that to be a really well-behaved, perfect child.
And it's like they understood and they adopted
what
that is.
But you go a layer deeper, it's probably coming from fear. And self-loathing. I mean, for me, it's like, because I, in certain aspects for a very short time, I was, quiet. I was reserved. But a lot of that came from shame and sadness and misunderstanding.
I don't want to do the wrong thing. I don't want people to get the wrong impression.
You just don't do anything. So you're like the fawn freeze. And so you go a layer deeper and you look into the kid who's feral, who's wild. Well, they're truly expressing themselves. They're crazy. They're hanging on chandeliers and they're flipping all around like a gymnast. Well, that's what we want to do. That's the real child. Childlike nature is the wonder, the curiosity, the excitement, the joy, the flipping. But
the walls might get dirty if you throw some paint around,
And so it's like, how do we create a container where we can truly allow people to be authentic in their childhood self, and also recognize that there is a degree of self-discipline that comes into that. So it's like, we can't just be all childlike all the time, then we're childish. We're ignoring our responsibilities. But we can't be all responsible and all serious all the time, because then we're ignoring our childlike wonder. And so it's like, it's this dance of, yes, taking care of our responsibilities and doing it in a way that we don't negatively affect other people.
Doing it in a perception of fun as well.
But doing it in a playful, childlike way. Because childlike wonder is very different than childish lack of integration. Because, I'm sure you've met men-child, like children, adults that are children, right? And that's a little bit different than someone who's an adult or someone who's grown that never grew up. Because being a child and being childish means that you're still, that whiny kid that knew they could get what they want when they whined. But being childlike and never growing up is maintaining the childlike wonder. And so there's a lot.
I like how we just never got to the DMT entity.
And so like kind of lending that back towards the spiritual aspect of life and these strange compounds that cause this wild experience. But so my DMT experience.
Right, so you've smoked DMT on several occasions?
Smoked DMT on several occasions. Don't really do it anymore. I just don't really see a need for it at this time in my experience.
So what made you want to do it, and have you had prior experience with psilocybin before this?
I had, yeah. So first I want to just have a disclaimer. Psychedelic substances exogenously or externally are very powerful. Not to be taken without intention. And they're not a party drug. The opposite, actually. So if you're looking to party and have a good old time, I would say just stick to your booze and your buds and just stay in that space.
And people can do whatever they want, and they might find this offensive what I'm about to say, but at things like raves. I've never gone to one, but everybody takes acid.
Well, that's true, and that's
like-
kind of how I was originally introduced to
Yeah.
this stuff. So I take that back. I think that everything has a place in every place.
it's
I was
interesting.
originally introduced to, well, I originally took psilocybin in high school. So that was my first introduction to a lot of this. Obviously, cannabis is entheogenic to a degree, but it's very light.
I just wanted to say, this is definitely totally fine if I'm being judgmental. I mean, this is a judgmental aspect of me that I'm just like highlighting. It's interesting, but I guess in my opinion, it's not really honoring or seeing the value in the medicine when you're doing it just to have a good time at a party.
Yeah.
Because then it's like,
at this point, I agree.
it's like same to take alcohol just to numb yourself or just to kind of escape and have this crazy experience, just to play a video game to escape the world type of thing. That's the type of feeling I have. But I mean, I don't know. Like maybe there's some people that really do take it for the spiritual experience with the rave. Not that a rave can't be a spiritual experience,
Yeah.
But still the intention in the space. I guess the overall intention, I'm assuming for most people, is just to do it for entertainment at these places.
Yeah.
But you can have a different intention at that spot.
How and why.
Yeah.
How and why. And you can set an intention anywhere. I just think in general, those spaces are much more laissez-faire, kind of airy-fairy. And it can be hard to integrate that sometimes when there's just so much impulse, so much stimulus going on.
So much energy around you,
Yeah,
like
it's
you're
just
absorbing,
a lot
you're
of energy.
open to all of that when you
Yeah.
take a psychedelic.
So that is, I took psilocybin in high school, psilocybin, and then I was introduced to LSD on my 21st birthday. And I literally took it and just went to dinner with my family, and it was insane.
Did they know you were on it?
No, absolutely not. I was just
Were you? Were they
seeing
suspicious?
geometrical shapes in my dad's face and stuff, and
You were just
just
holding a normal
playing-
conversation with him?
yeah. Well, what I found out was I guess I just lean towards my consciousness is kind of just like that because of being an artist and being creative in general. I just see the world in a very interesting lens. So it's it was pretty profound and fun, but it wasn't overwhelming or unfamiliar. It was kind of I already kind of played with those things just in my own space. So, but it was pretty cool. But I started out, doing psychedelics in a party environment, music festivals and shows, raves, whatever you want to call them. I started out doing psychedelics in those spaces. But yeah, you just start to become more subtly aware of the energies at play. And you just become less motivated to take those in those spaces because it's just so much energy. And a lot of people are very unconscious.
I would feel very unsafe doing that personally out there. And
It is, you do feel very unsafe. You do. And that was a big reason I just stopped doing it. Just because, there's not a lot of intention. There's no container. There's not it's not a safe environment. Psychedelics, you're already kind of going into the wild, wild west of the psyche, So it's it ties back into what we were just saying, the intention, why, and how. Because not really what, because anything can be a potential for transformation.
When I first started with the psychedelics, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to take this. My whole life's going to change after one trip. I mean, not that can't happen based on how you integrate, right? You can have very life-changing, but it's not this thing is going to cause you to
Yeah.
It's not going to cause you to step into a new reality.
And maybe it will. And maybe just momentarily.
If it inspires inside you
that's
to embody that, but not itself. It in itself doesn't embody that for you.
That's the ticket right there. Is all of these substances are ultimately tools, one way or the other, helpful or not helpful. It's all about the intention and the integration, because really all they are is reminders of what we already have the capacity to access within ourselves. And that's why I love breath work, because it's closer to the mark for me. Because it's it's a reminder, and it's oh, I did that literally with my breath. Whereas opposed to sometimes, you can take these substances And then you get caught up in the substance, thinking that the substance was the one that created the experience. And so you need this substance to continue that path. Where in reality, no, it's like the whole substance was doing, the whole reason the substance was creating that experience was because of what was already in you. And the intention you set. So it's like the problem is not seeking outside yourself. It's thinking you found the answer in something outside
yourself. Oh!
So yeah, so all that to say, to kind of get into the specific, you know, my specific
like
experience
breakthrough or something. I don't know.
Like, with the DMT. So I smoked DMT several times. First time it was just kind of, it was pretty profound in the way it was more like my intention still wasn't really there. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just kind of.
You were just like, ooh, I want to do this.
I want to see cool things, and it was like, all right, we can show you a cool thing.
And that might be, that might be the entryway into a more intentional way. Like you go there and maybe something shows you something, you know?
Yeah, I think it's all about stages. It's like you got to have some introduction. You can't just straight blast off into oblivion.
And there's no wrong way to get introduced. It's not like, okay, you went to a rave, you took some mushrooms, that's wrong. There's no right or wrong.
There,
you know?
It's just like the breath. If we can breathe in a certain way, chances are we're supposed to be able to breathe in that way. We just got to, kind of navigate and figure out when to breathe, how, and why. And same with these substances. So my first experience with DMT was, pretty interesting. I smoked a little bit on some tobacco. And it just kind of changed my visual field. Everything got super bright. Like all the colors got vibrant, all the greens on the trees, because we were outside, and that's the best way to do it. Outside's amazing. I mean, it's just so beautiful. But the greens on the tree got like neon. So it's like the oranges became like neon orange and neon green, and everything was like, it's like the dial of color turned up like 20 notches into all neon. And then like everything in my visual field just started honeycombing. So everything just became these like hexagons. And then it just stayed like that for a few minutes. And it was just hexagon, 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 and everything was hexagonal. And then it just kind of dissipated, it dissolved, and then went back to normal. And that was pretty much my first experience with it. And then I did it a few more times, and it was similar. Fast forward several years, 5 years just about. And I had those few experiences with DMT, but I kind of wanted to take it a level deeper.
So you were going to the you didn't take that much that first time?
No, it wasn't a lot. And what wasn't told to me, and which was probably good just for an introduction, right, is you actually preferably want to take multiple hits. And I don't want to explain it too much because I'll let people do their own research and like I said, disclaimers, because it's like it's heavy, it's hardcore stuff.
I've never smoked DMT, so
it's really, really, I mean, yeah. So we'll get into this next experience. But I had kind of set the intention that I want to have, I want to blast off is what people call it. I want to have an out of body experience. I want to see where this substance can take me. Right. But I kind of started it in like an egoic, mindset. It was kind of funny.
Like what kind? Can you go in more?
Just like, oh, I've done DMT before. All you got to do is just hold it in. And I smoked it out of this contraption you would call like a rig, right? Like it's like a bigger water pipe. It's got like a nail, which is like, it's quartz. And so it gets really hot and it's able to burn things at a different temperature, different rate. And so I hit it a couple times out of this thing. And I just said that. I was just like, all you got to do is just hold it in.
So you were taking care of a couple people?
Yes. So there was a few people around. They were, me and 3 or 4 other people. So they were kind of watching as the experiment unfolded. And so I just said, all you got to do is just hold it in. And the next thing I know, all I can hear is just hold it in, hold it in, hold it in, hold it in. And then like my reality literally starts to just fragment. Like it's like fractaling out and separating from itself. And it's like I am Fibonacci spiraling into my pineal gland, like into the center of my brain. Like my head went like this, and just hold it in, hold it in, hold it in. And so like my whole reality is going like this, shoo, 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 while I'm going like this, shoo, 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 shoo. And it was like,
oh man,
so odd. And then so basically once I hit the center of that spiral, and my reality just separated, I blasted off into this space of just nothingness. It was like nothing and everything. It was like this white luminescent room.
Oh, that reminds me of Space Odyssey. Have you watched it?
I haven't.
2001 Space Odyssey.
Oh, I need to.
Yeah.
But basically what happened is as I entered this room, there was like all of these beings, these luminescent, like, basically translucent, see-through beings.
And you're in this white luminescent room.
Yeah, that went on forever, but it was nowhere. It's like there was no walls, there was no beginning or end to this place.
But you still felt like a room.
Yeah, it felt like a room, but there was no walls, no floor, no ceiling. It just went on forever. And then there was these beings, and they almost looked like praying mantises, but also kind of like snakes. It was like the top of them were like praying mantis-y, and they were like snake praying mantises. But they were also like rainbow luminescent. So they were translucent, luminescent, and rainbow. So it's like they were like see-through, but also not see-through, and then like kind of rainbow, translucent. I don't know. It's the best way I can describe it. And when I got there, I had come in kind of an egoic standpoint. I'm just like, you just hold it in. And the next thing I know, I'm in this other dimension. I'm like, what is going on? I'm like freaking out. I'm like,
held it in.
Yeah, I held it in. And how did I get here though?
Were you still having like thoughts? Like you were still able to think in this space? But you're not in your body at all.
Well,
but you're in your body.
It's kind of loose.
Mixed?
So no body. And thoughts, yes. But it's like my thoughts were the reality. So it's like everything I thought perpetuated into infinity in that reality. So I came in a frantic state, and then all these beings are like, what are you doing here? How did you get here? What's going on?
Because you're exuding this energy of like, what?
Yeah, whoa. So I'm like oscillating this frequency of just like completely baffled. Just like mind blown, literally. Like I blew my mind
The
up.
mind blown frequency.
Yes, the mind blown frequency.
I love that. That should be a podcast episode name.
The mind blown frequency.
Yes, I'm going to change my name to that.
I like it. But yeah, so basically it's like all these beings were basically like trying to guide me into a harmonic state. They were just reminding me. They're like, it's love. They're like, because at first they're all freaking out and they're kind of frantic and they're like, it's kind of like they're running around, but they're not running around.
Because this human that just appeared in our reality. Because they just float
around. Yeah, they're just like floating around. They're like, oh, what's going on? Like, where did this guy come from? He's like throwing off the whole wave, man. Like, he's going crazy. And I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? And so basically they're like, no, they're like, it's all love. And they're just like, love. And it's just like perpetuate, love. And I'm like, oh,
love.
Oh, love. And they're like, now they're all like cheering. They're like, like as if it was like in a stadium, a football stadium, and you get the whole crowd doing the wave. It's like they're doing this. They're just like, yes. And they're all just like cheering me on. They're like, yes, love. It like just goes out into infinity. And they're like, love. And so obviously this must have been 15, 20 minutes, our time, real time. But their time, it just felt like forever. It felt like I was there for centuries, hundreds of years or something. It's kind of still vague to this day, and then so basically I came back and I'm like in the fetal position on the ground and I'm just like, love. And like I can hear myself saying it, but I'm still kind of like coming back in my body. So it's like third person.
And I can Are you seeing yourself?
I can see myself third person.
Eagle view.
Yes. Like I can see myself third person, just like on the ground in the fetal position, saying love. And then I finally come back, and I'm still saying love, and I like look up at my friends that I was in the same room with, and they're all just like looking at me like, what just happened? Like that was crazy for them to watch because they're on the other side. They're just watching my physical experience, my physical expression.
Were you moving during that experience?
Yes, because I started out on the couch. So somehow I got from the couch to the floor, and then I'm just rocking in the fetal position saying love for who knows how long. And so like they literally told me, they're like, you looked like a newborn baby. They're like, when you came back, and like you looked like you had just been reborn. And I was like, in a way, I was. I was.
So was that one of your most intense DMT experiences, do you think?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So what do you believe about that experience? Do you believe that you actually you shot up into you raised the DMT caused your frequency to raise, or somehow you're able to detach from this reality and go to this other reality. Do you believe that in the existence of this other reality with these beings, or how do you conceptualize this when you come back?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so I will preface by saying I feel like a lot of this, and this is why I lean more towards the direct experience of my own, my own wisdoms, is because a lot of it's really hard to integrate.
Yeah.
A lot of it's hard to integrate or even make sense of.
Yeah.
And I'm still like, this is almost a decade after that. And I'm still like, I don't really understand what happened. But there are things that slowly integrate time to time, moment to moment. But I feel like a lot of it was just like, I don't know if I necessarily believe in hallucinating. Because, to hallucinate by definition is to see something that's not there. I don't think that we hallucinate. I don't think that we see things that aren't there. I just think we see more of what already is. We see deeper layers, and I could compare it to like blasting off in a rocket ship and going to this place that's super far away, and all this stuff, because it kind of is like that. It's like trying.
Now you're teleported to the center of the sun or something.
I'm becoming an astronaut without having ever gone to astronaut school. Or
intronaut.
An intronaut, and then that's where I was going to go with it. Is like I don't think it's really a blasting off; it's a blasting in. Yeah, it's like I'm not becoming bigger and going out. I'm becoming smaller and going in, and that's where it felt like I was.
This is just so crazy. Like, am I just looking at myself right now? Am I just talking to myself? Because I went into this thing where I had so many experiences of like just levels of like levels of feeling the oneness, where I really just like I made a video that's literally like I am you, like, because that's just like if it's all one, then I am you, but not in terms of like
not the ego though.
Not the ego.
And that's what I think can get convoluted for a lot of people, especially when so many people do identify so deeply with their ego. And it's like an ego is not something we get rid of because it is part of us, right? It's just something we integrate. But yeah, like I think on the base level of like going in, like fundamentally, I am you.
Like the consciousness, the
yeah,
awareness, the baseline.
When it comes down to
the
the core of it all, the consciousness of all, we are one. And like we hear this in so many different cultures in so many different ways. But I do think it's different to have a direct experience with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think there's many different ways to have experience with that.
Yeah.
And there's gentler ways, and there's more subtle ways, and there's softer ways, and then there's like abrupt ways.
Have you had an experience of oneness?
There's like eggshell cracking ways.
Have you?
Yeah. I mean, often.
Yeah.
It's a wave thing, right? And this is kind of what I think about enlightenment. Enlightenment to me is nothing more than this.
Yeah.
Right? It's like it's subtle layers of awareness of the now, the present moment. The more you become aware of what is always unfolding, that's enlightenment. But it's like this constant like ebbs and flows, and so like we play these roles, Leila, the play, the dance of life. It's like we play these roles in person, right? To be a person, etymologically, persona, mask. Mm-hmm. We wear these masks. We have this ego, but it's like underneath it all, we just are.
We're just here to experience ourselves in this form, in this perspective.
Yeah, it's like we're the stillness behind the movement, but we are still moving, and movement is medicine. Mm. But we are also the stillness.
It's like we're here for the medicine of being human.
Yeah, with all of its...
The light just came in.
Yeah. Yeah, with all of its thrills and whimsical nature. It's like we are gifted the blessing of experiencing the hardships and the turmoil and like this tough stuff of being human. But that's what also allows us to experience the beauty and the joy and the illusion of separation to love ourselves.
It's so interesting because people experience such deep states of loneliness. But when I had my experience one of my experiences of oneness, I made a video about this, but I I felt deeply lonely as like being the creator of just the creative force of everything. So I'm like, oh, I can just play around, sandbox, anything, but I'm by myself, I'm one. And then I was like, okay, if I love myself, I split up into separateness, into others that.
And this is what the Hindus would consider their archetypes, their deities. Archetypes, right? You have Atman, Brahman, right? To know, to not know. You have Shiva, Shakti, energy, information, yin, yang, masculine, feminine. And that trickles
creation,
out.
Creation, destruction.
Yes, Shiva, Shakti, creation, destruction. Those archetypes trickle out hundreds, right? Same with us. And so it's like in the loneliness. So the poison is the medicine. It's not the poison, it's the dosage that makes the medicine. So the dosage of separation is the love, is the medicine. And so it's like by recognizing that loneliness of all, you recognize the purpose of the human experience.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's like by being lonely, I'm able to deeper have compassion and understanding and connection to God, to Source.
Dude, that was circle.
Yeah, and see, I haven't even really said that in words till right now.
Yeah.
So it's like, and that's another part of the human design thing that I like is my authority is to speak. When I speak, I collect my thoughts and my awareness. So as the awareness moves through me and comes out of me, I am self-organizing. So I am organizing it and recapitulating and better understanding it.
You can't let yourself block it though.
As I say it, yes. But then it's when I don't speak. It's when I don't speak with true authority and authenticity that then I begin to block it. Push it down, suppress it out, numb it. And that's when we experience dis-ease, disharmony.
In the body.
And then it manifests.
Apparently I'm not speaking enough. Not like here, because I need to be silent to listen, but like in general, apparently something's not.
Yeah.
Something's.
And there's very intuitive ways to go about this that are foreign to a lot of our culture, our people, especially in America, just because of the way we have our society structured.
Yeah.
But there's very intuitive ways, and this stuff's been around a long time. In Christianity, they talk about speaking in tongues. You have throat singing, you have what people call light language or channeling.
And we'll have a couple podcasts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you have these many different facets and aspects of something that's the same. When we can allow our sound frequencies oscillating or vibrating to move in a way that transcends analytical thought, we can actually heal in certain ways just through these tonalities.
And so like not logical, that's the thing.
It's not logical.
And then it's like
you play.
And it's like within our society. Within our society, this is like a fucking weirdo, what the fuck?
Yeah, but when you experience it and you can feel the frequency of that and you're like, that was realer than real. That's realer than anything I said today.
Yeah.
It's like, there's direct experience. But so many people are afraid, right? And it says over 100 and I think 30, maybe even 50 times in the Bible. I can't recall the exact number. It might even be around 300. I can't recall. But do not fear. Have no fear. Fear. Nothing to fear. I mean, nothing to fear but fear itself. It's like fear is what keeps us from experiencing our most authentic self.
Fear and being locked in a story and how something should be.
Back to Wetiko, the mind virus. It's like when we put things in a box and we tell ourselves this is how it is, because obviously I wouldn't entertain a unrealistic thought, right? Like my beliefs I wouldn't believe something that, wouldn't make sense.
But we believe that our beliefs are real.
Because that's silly. Yeah, exactly. But when you can really question belief,
even the most logical beliefs, do you know what I mean?
When you can question all belief, because beliefs are so powerful that we don't even realize how powerful they are. When you can question all belief, that's when you're really onto something.
All right. Well, you guys, David Sauve, David Sauve. He's going to be making his own podcast. What is it called?
Another Seat at the Table.
Another Seat at the Table. So I'll link your Instagram. What else you got that you want to link down?
Yeah. So my business is Numatera Wellness, which is the breathwork and coaching business. David M Wellness on Instagram, and then the podcast coming out, Another Seat at the Table. So.
And what is the premise for the podcast, if you want to?
Yeah. So the premise is, the reason I said Another Seat at the Table is I believe this is in Italy. I'll have to look back and really kind of reference so I know what I'm talking about. Clearly I don't, but the concept is they always have another seat at the table. They have another place set at the table in case a friend or a stranger, if anyone were to just show up to their house and want to have dinner with them, they have an extra seat at the table. They have another seat at the table. And so it kind of ties into open, it's an open platform for people to come and to share their life experiences.
Another passenger.
Yeah.
On
and
the life trip.
It's a non-judgmental space to just where people can feel included, since we're tribal creatures, we want connection.
Yeah. Well, that's really cool. Yeah. So go down there. Takes like a second to click, like this podcast. You can if you want to rate it on like Spotify, that would be very helpful. Anything like this down below. And yes,
thank you all for listening. If you've made it this far, I hope you've been able to extract some sort of wisdom out of this. And I love and appreciate everyone for your own individual, unique expression. That's what it's all about.
An interaction with this content.
Yeah.
Within yourself.
Yeah. Deeply. Deeply grateful. So.
Yeah. All right. Peace out. I don't have an outro.
Yeah. That's okay.
What do I say?
You'll get one eventually.
Yeah, I don't have music or an outro. I want to make my own music though.
Yeah.
That's my outro.
And that's it. That's it. You just use that on every podcast.
Thank you so much for getting to the end of this episode. If you'd like to support the podcast, rate, review, comment, let me know what you think. And you can visit vibrationtranslation.com to purchase from the shop or donate. All links are down below, and I sincerely appreciate any and all of your support. Thank you, and I'll see you for the next one.